Hi, my name is Monique Claiborne, President and CEO of Greater Portland Inc. Greater Portland Inc. is a regional economic development organization and is the only public-private partnership recruiting companies to the entire bi-state metro area. This is a key election year for our region, and there are three candidates vying for the Oregon's governor's seat. We invited them here to learn how they would tackle issues critical to the state's economic growth. Betsy Johnson is here with me now. Betsy served in the Oregon legislature for more than 20 years. She's running for governor and is an independent. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you. Do you want to go right to the questions, or do you want me to make an opening comment about GPI?
It's whatever you want to do.
Okay. Well, I would just say that if GPI didn't exist, we would want to invent it. GPI is the table at which conversations about recruitment and retention occur. And I believe that GPI was absolutely seminal in helping to recruit the underpinnings of OMIC, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center that we put together out in Scappoose, that is a partnership between academia, government, business, and we added philanthropy when we put OMIC together. But I think you're sitting in your boardroom, and I remember many hours in that boardroom negotiating with PCC and others to build out now a 500-acre campus that is ready to entertain exactly the kind of businesses that we want here in Oregon. And my recollection is that GPI was born out of the recession of 2008 and 9. But if you guys didn't exist and didn't set the table, we would be missing opportunities for business retention as well as recruitment, because both are equally important. And I can't thank Janet Labar. Oh, I'm so sorry, Monique. I can't thank Janet Labar enough for what she did to help set the table for us to have a conversation that has drawn now 40 marquee companies from literally around the world to come to Oregon to talk about research and development in hard metals manufacturing and additive manufacturing. These companies are from Europe and from Asia. We are modeled at OMIC on the AMRC, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center. And I couldn't help but think yesterday with great sorrow as I noted the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth had been to the AMRC a couple of times. And as Adrian Allen, the founder of AMRC that OMIC is modeled on, he said to me, because I have a picture of Adrian and Her Majesty together, Adrian said, the Queen usually visits countries. She doesn't visit companies. And there she was. She and I incidentally stood in the same place in the elevator. So we've mixed shoe molecules. But with that kind of opening statement about my high regard for Greater Portland Inc., and the fact that in this tape, and you're going to play it for your members and your board, that I would volunteer to work hand in hand with you as the recruiter in chief to try to make sure that we maximize the opportunity for Oregon to not only get our reputation back, but begin to be a welcoming place for exactly the kind of companies and jobs and opportunity that we all want.
Thank you. I appreciate that and would welcome the opportunity to work with you. So that brings me to my first question. The Greater Portland region is the state's economic driver, but it's losing its appeal as a good place to live and work due to increased crime, homelessness, and trash. What would you do as governor to restore Greater Portland's vibrancy?
Well, you just hit all of the main problems. Oregon cannot succeed if Portland fails. And by most measures, Portland is failing right now. And by Portland, definitionally, I would expand that into the other areas that you cover. Homelessness and trash used to be a Portland problem, not anymore. It's a proliferation in metropolitan areas, Salem, Eugene, Astoria. That issue is everywhere. The governor has an enormous opportunity to use the bully pulpit of the governor's office to call out the problem. The first thing I would do, literally the day after the election, is to convene the people who have relevant roles in dealing with homelessness. For too long, we've been siloed in dealing with homelessness. There were different philosophies of whether you shelter first or you work on the underlying problems first. There's plenty of money floating around, and somebody told me that there are upwards of 30 organizations right now, 300 not-for-profits, that are working on the issue, but we haven't moved the needle. I would submit that we need good data to see what's the profile of the people on the streets. I've worked very closely with Jordan Schnitzer and some others in repurposing Wapato. Wapato, of course, was built as a minimum security jail and then was abandoned when there was no operating funds. It sat empty and neglected for 20 years. I was able to make a marriage between Jordan Schnitzer and a guy named Alan Evans, who has run Helping Hands for a couple of decades. And we have now repurposed Wapato to be a healing place of recovery and re-entry. Ours is criticized as being a high barrier model, but I think having people work, contribute to their room and board, maintain clean and sober lifestyles, is important to the accountability piece in getting people back on their feet. But the city and the county for a long time took considerable exception to that methodology. I believe it's the correct methodology. Everybody at Helping Hands right now has their own individual, personalized, data-driven, trauma-informed plan for recovery. And but that's not the only model. But to answer your question, on the day after the election, I would convene all of these relevant groups and talk about budgets, data. How do we know we've moved the needle on getting people off the streets? Assign accountabilities and dates when projects were due. Get can do, want to, will do people working on this. And if they don't produce within the agreed upon timeline, get different people. I represented a little town called Vernonia that twice in a decade suffered from 500-year floods. The entire town was basically washed away. When that happened, there was an intense sense of urgency. FEMA trailers were moved in. Recovery started immediately. We all talk about this as though the homelessness in Portland, especially, as though it were an emergency. We don't act like it. And so I believe there's adequate funds. We need adequate leadership. We need a convening to figure out how do we deliver on what people are expecting for their tax money. And I think the crime, the homelessness, and the trash all go hand in hand. And then last but not least, we've got to do something about the proliferation of hard drugs and the open air drug markets in downtown that make it unsafe, a public health emergency. And I would lead the conversation to re-refer ballot measure 110 to the voters. And if the legislature won't do that, I'd lead the charge to go get the signatures. We have functionally legalized hard drugs with the promise of treatment that nobody is taking up. We got to get serious about this.
Yeah, thank you. So this question comes from our interview sponsor, Moss Adams. What are your 3 top economic priorities and how do you plan to address them?
Well, we just talked about them. I'm cleaning up the streets, reducing crime. We've got to get housing. We cannot recruit people and companies to our area without affordability and houses. Right now, we have an affordability problem because we have a supply problem, and Oregon can't be livable if it's not affordable. So we have got to figure out, how do we get all of the infrastructure that supports recruitment here? How do we have an attitude that projects to companies, we want you? I'm talking to a lot of people in the course of the campaign, and I've had folks that moved out of Oregon, sadly, and went to Austin, Texas. They report to me that the attitude in Austin is, how do we help you? What do we do? Here are the people from our economic development department. Here's the matrix of permits that you need. Here's your pathfinder or your liaison to state government. What we need, if you look back on that after action report that happened after the tallest tree in our Silicon Forest, Intel took a big cohort of their business to Ohio. And we formed the response task force after the horse was already out of the barn. but it functionally says what my economic priorities are. We need more land for residential and industrial expansion. We need a better tax structure. We need more tools in our economic development toolbox. And these, what few tools we have as compared to New York or other places that have all kinds of tax accommodation, the few tools that we have are under assault in the legislature by people who deem those tools corporate welfare. And then finally, we need functioning schools that are aligned all across the continuum, from the little bitty kids all the way up through university. Excuse me. So I think those that my economic priorities align with the priorities that were in that report that was developed and produced and published after Intel took a piece of its business to Ohio.
So that's a great segue into my next question regarding business retention and expansion. We all need to row in the same direction to ensure existing companies stay and grow here. As governor, how will you ensure alignment across state agencies, particularly Business Oregon, the Bureau of Labor and Industries, and the Departments of Revenue and Energy, in support of business retention and expansion in our core industries, such as semiconductor, apparel and outdoor, software, and food and beverage?
Well, my first answer is pay attention and pick up the damn phone. I had the opportunity to talk to Andy Bryant, who managed Intel here in Oregon. And during the course of the conversation, the question was posed, could anything have been done to stop Intel looking to expand someplace else? Andy was much more diplomatic in his response, but I'm going to paraphrase for brevity. And that response was, pick up the damn phone. I think that Oregon has had at the legislative level and at the gubernatorial level a kind of laissez-faire, if not antagonistic attitude towards business. Antagonistic, certainly in the legislature. I've been criticized for saying that I would have the CEOs of our major companies in those sectors that you just described in your question, that I would have those on speed dial. And people have been very critical of me saying that. I would call some guy running a shoe repair store as easily as I would call the guy running Intel. How's it going? What's the business environment? How are you being treated? What's the regulatory world look like? So it's paying attention and acting as though business recruitment and retention are important. The other thing is, and Governor Kitzhaber started this, and unfortunately, it's just sort of morphed into mush. But the regional solutions, he called it community solutions. This was the table around which the major agencies would sit to actually work with a company to help with all of the permitting issues. They would sit down with their representatives who carried the card of the governor and answered to the governor with the implicit imprimatur of the governor on their activities to say, let's get to yes. So I've sat in on countless of those meetings, going back into the Kitzhaber days. I'm the convener at Governor Brown's request for Northwest Oregon right now. And at that table are DEQ, transportation, DLCD. And I have watched companies come in and make presentations. And when Regional Solutions is functioning optimally, the answer is we'll get back to you with exactly how you work your way through the regulatory conundrum that is Oregon. We've got way too many agencies promulgating way too many rules that have made locating here difficult. And frankly, if your members go back and read the cover story of Willamette Week that has me on the front page that says The Advocate, that'll give you a pretty good idea of my approach to working with state agencies. I was a ferocious advocate for economic development in my district, working on little stuff, on big stuff, on permitting, on badgering state agencies to do their job with a sense of urgency and acting like time and money means something. While some people may have seen that article as critical, I wear it as a badge of honor. The fact that if I'm working on the weekends and I had an Oregonian in trouble that needed help from a state agency, I'd call up agencies on the weekends and say, let's get to yes on this. I didn't always win, and I readily admit that. but just reaching out and fighting the good fight on behalf of economic development and citizens that needed help. I didn't ask, are you an R or a D? I would go to all lengths to fight the good fight for people that wanted to create economic development. So that would be the attitude that I would bring to this office, and particularly trying to say to the agencies, let's approach every one of these permitting questions with a sense of urgency and timeliness. And you start at yes until you get an insurmountable no. We frequently start at no. And then the other thing is to be present in trying to negotiate solutions to litigation that have stopped many projects. I had in my old Senate district a $2 billion biofuels project. Biofuels were supposed to be part of Oregon's bridge to a less carbon intensive future. That company has had nothing but permitting hassles and change of rules and agencies' abrupt reversal when they decided to say one thing and then suddenly they reverse and say something that is contrary. I don't think that Kate Brown has run the executive department with a very firm hand. And while the cat has turned the cat's attention away from the state agencies, the mice have gotten awfully frisky. And agencies are promulgating their own rules, which have stretched the limits, the elasticity of what the legislature intended. I'd want to find out what rules are under promulgation right now. How transparent has the process been? How much are you including the regulated community? One agency has said we've changed the culture of the agency and we have to worry less about the regulated community. That is absolutely contrary to my view. My view is we do it with Oregonians, not to Oregonians. And if some company's coming from another jurisdiction into our state, we put out the welcome mat. We don't give them the 52 reasons why they can't settle here.
Right. So business retention and expansion is one bucket, and then business attraction is another. What is your short-term and long-term strategy to attract domestic and international companies to the state and Greater Portland?
Well, I've already touched on some of them. The short term is pay attention, pick up the phone. I'll use OMIC as an example because you mentioned international. If you look at the roster of companies that are within the gravitational pull of OMIC, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center, they are Asian and they are European companies. And I can tell you, having worked very closely with some of those companies, that they arrive at PDX and they say, world-class airport, where's the world-class city to go with it? We've just had 3 hotels in the last, 48 hours announce that they're closing because of the horrific conditions downtown. So long-term, we have got to get systemic changes that get us our reputation back. I used to be so proud as a native daughter of this place when people said, where are you from? I'm from Oregon. And we have cool beer. We've got a cool foodie scene. We've got a vibrant downtown where people want to congregate and socialize and do business. All that's gone until we get some of the plague that is the crime and filth and homelessness crisis off of the streets of Portland so that people want to come back into this city. The other thing, Monique, that is so pernicious here is as we jerk around some of these international companies that have wanted to come to Oregon, and I'm going to cite Jordan Cove down in Coos Bay, that's a Canadian company, Pembina, and we jerked them around here in Portland. We're jerking around Next, which is the biofuels company in Columbia County. Their offtake customers are international companies in many cases. And if the word goes out that Oregon is impossible to do business in, that reverberates in a very negative way through the international business scene. And I can't help but believe that when Pembina didn't get a square shot at permitting, that the word went out, it's impossible to get a permit in Oregon because the rules change all the time. The agency heads have agendas, or their immediate underneath layer of bureaucrats have their agenda. when a DEQ person was in a photograph protesting Jordan Cove, the very agency that Jordan Cove needed a permit from. What does that say to senior management about getting a fair shake in Oregon? So I very much would want to attract domestic and international. And I go back to Vic Atiyeh, who was our last serious emissary to the world on behalf of Oregon. I credit Governor Atiyeh with opening up our relationship with Japan, that has proven to be a long and fruitful and beneficial relationship. Back when I was still in the helicopter business, I flew on a movie called From Oregon with Love, about a young Japanese boy who comes to Oregon, and how proud I was to be part of that association with building and strengthening our relationship with Japan. As far as I'm concerned, I would have the card of the governor and would travel. I don't know if this is mythology or true, but a company was going to settle in California, and Arnold Schwarzenegger showed up on the site to help the company. That's the kind of governor I want to be. I want them, whoever the them is, whether we're retaining or recruiting, I want them to know their governor cares. The retention piece is the one that worries me the most, because I've been calling a lot of people, frankly, to help with my campaign. And the number of CEOs that are of our stewardship class, our entrepreneurs, our innovators, that have said to me, we've either moved or we're on the cusp of moving. And if we elect an anti-business, anti-corporation governor, and I'm going to go ahead and name names, Tina Kotek, they're out of here. That's horrible for Oregon, because those are our people of civic engagement, of philanthropy, of job creation. I would be a governor that transmits the message, I care, we want you here, and I will knock down every impediment to either keeping you here or recruiting companies to come here.
Thank you. So credits and incentives, and you touched on that a little bit earlier. I was on the Semiconductor Task Force and co-chaired the Credits and Incentives Subcommittee. And there are a number of recommendations that came out of that. What kind of political capital do you have to move a large economic incentives package?
I think huge. And if you and your members get on board and help me build that capital, we'll have more. I mean, I am offering right now in this recording to GPI, I want to be your partner. And having the governor as your full-throated, enthusiastic, knowledgeable partner, I think creates that deep reservoir of capital to move a project. And I can't imagine a legislator, an R or a D, who wouldn't be seeking incentive opportunities for their district. I have noticed that not every legislator takes the hands-on, engaged, aggressive attitude I take in recruiting businesses to Senate District 16. But I would work with those legislators who don't see that as part of their responsibilities to broaden that scope. We're going to have a lot of new legislators. And if I can share my experience of trying to help the nascent brewing industry up in Astoria when they needed a way to get rid of their fermentation discharge, to figure out beneficial uses for brewer's yeast, to be there at their openings and their ribbon cuttings, nothing begets success like success. And I think that I have a demonstrable track record of creating 125 jobs out of a brownfield, of helping to get trucks off the road by expanding the opportunity to move things by barge. There are numerous opportunities. And to bring legislators along to see the clear benefit in believing that part of their mission is to clear the way for that job retention and recruitment, I think is a tool in the governor's toolbox, at least in this governor's toolbox.
That's great. Oregon is missing out on well-paying jobs due to a lack of large parcels of land. Often we're not even in the running for large business recruitment projects, as detailed in the statewide Semiconductor Task Force recent report. What is your plan to alleviate land scarcity and provide resources for site readiness?
Well, that's an action item and we have to do it. I would point out the amalgamation of land that I helped negotiate in Scappoose. We have 500 acres of contiguous property with a patient capital developer waiting for economic opportunity. We got circulating around OMIC. We got crushed by COVID, as many Oregonians and well, the whole nation, or the whole world got crushed by COVID. So our development was much more active pre-pandemic, but we have set the table for economic opportunity. Did I break a few eggs along the way? You're damn right I did, because I saw the benefit in amalgamating this footprint that was serviced and ready for development that, oh, by the way, included the creation of a community college. PCC, I worked on this for 20 years of just bludgeoning PCC. All of the Columbia County was in their tax catchment area, and all the money had gone one direction, out of Columbia County to PCC, Portland Community College, without any reciprocity. And finally, working with the board and with President Mitsui, Portland Community College made the commitment to put in the middle of this campus a PCC facility that whose curricula is aligned with OMIC and aligned with the grade schools and aligned with the high schools. We have a very robust internship program, but amalgamating that footprint of land was very difficult. It went to a vote of the people at one point in time. We make it very easy to stop stuff. We make it very difficult frequently to move stuff forward. But I would cite as my ability to get the job done, putting together this parcel of property around OMIC that now awaits development. And as, again, I go back to our North Star, which is the AMRC, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center, that I know at least one of your board, Randy Miller, has visited. They talked about the Boeing effect at AMRC, that once Boeing was heavily invested in moving the AMRC forward, that it dramatically changed the real estate profile around the AMRC. Just like OMIC, the AMRC had an airport at its heart. They ended up, it hurts me to say this, digging up the airport to build additional buildings on it because the real estate became so valuable. They extended public transit. They built housing. I don't think that the people that founded the AMRC had any conception of the explosive growth and opportunity that happened around AMRC. So I would submit to your members that I've got a track record that they can drive 25 minutes out of Portland, stand on the ground and see what we're doing. We're just finishing our second building. And I take, in case it's not obvious in my comments, enormous pride in the fact that I was one of the leaders in pulling that all together. Break a few eggs along the way? Yeah. But do we have now a jewel to offer into your sphere of influence, developable property, so that you've got something to show when people reach out to GPI and say, what are the Oregon opportunities?
That's a great example. Thank you, Betsy, for joining me today. Thank you.
I appreciate your time, and I think we made it in within the prescribed period. So I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you as well as your members. And you can absolutely take to the bank my promise that I would be a full-throated, energetic partner with GPI in helping to revitalize our part of Oregon.
Thank you.
Thank you.